everyone. This is NainaMD, Fusion of Science and Beauty, right here in Beverly Hills. Welcome to my show. As you know, the concept of the show is to bring credibility into anti-aging and regenerative medicine and knowledge about the specialty. It is not a recognized specialty yet, and that's why I want to bring you about the knowledge. One of the topics today is about SpectraCell, a company that I've known for over 20 years. It has emerged to the place where it is really doing some amazing testing. In conventional medicine, sometimes the blood tests don't always tell the story. And as a result, we need to sometimes look elsewhere to try to help us determine what things may be going wrong with ourselves. And there's two topics today, especially with SpectraCell, that I want to get into. I've got a fabulous guest. Her name is Beth Cooper. She's an educational consultant, and she's with SpectraCell for a long time. I'd like to welcome her. Hello, Beth. How are you?
Hi, Dr. Naina. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, I want the audience to really know first that there is sometimes a place where we have to go outside of conventional testing. I think personally that the basic blood tests are very archaic. They really don't tell us what real time or what the biochemical imbalances may be happening past a certain point.
Right.
And those blood tests are great for acute care, something that if you're going to go wrong, pretty sick, pretty quick. But sometimes there's imbalances that are happening in our body that the blood tests are not going to tell. Right. And I'm just going to give you an example. It's like when you go to the doctor and he says, oh, I got my liver function test today and they're all great. Well, the liver function test, the only purpose of the liver function test is when it indicates cell death of the liver. Right. The cells are dying, those enzymes are released out into the bloodstream, and then that's what's measured.
Right.
But it doesn't tell you how the detoxification pathways are. It doesn't tell you, that you might maybe have genetic mutations where you can't detoxify certain drugs. Right. So you could have a normal liver function test and think falsely that everything is fine with your liver when it's not. So similarly, there's other imbalances that are occurring in our body almost on a daily basis. And I think one of the things which I really wanted to draw attention to the audience is about micronutrients.
Right.
As we know, micronutrients consist of amino acids, they consist of vitamins, minerals, and these are antioxidants. These are all very important in how our body functions on a daily basis. And yet, we never get a clue about really how imbalanced we are. In fact, a lot of the disease states are biochemically due to some of these imbalances.
Most of them are, actually.
And absolutely. I like to be a little bit diplomatic when I say those things because it really undermines then, a lot of what we do when we try to treat sometimes a symptom with just a drug. But in actuality, you're absolutely right. So much of what we find as far as diseases or imbalances are really due to just these micronutrient deficiencies. Right. So please tell the audience about what is SpectraCell. They've not even heard about SpectraCell probably. I know in integrative medicine and naturopathic and alternative medicine, SpectraCell is like the Cartier company. But no one really on mainstream understands it. So what is SpectraCell? What was their mission statement? And then we'll get into micronutrient deficiency testing.
Well, SpectraCell has been around for over 20 years now, and we are based in Houston, Texas. And we came out with a test that looks at the function of the cells in the presence and absence of the various nutrients. So what we can determine is whether you have a deficiency of a particular nutrient on a cellular level. And that's very important.
That's inside the cell. So in other words, if you measure, let's say, a nutrient level in the bloodstream, that's not going to really tell you what's happening inside the cell and did it get into the cell.
That's exactly right. That's what
sets
that
function.
Right. That's what sets SpectraCell apart. When you get a vitamin D test at your regular lab, the problem with that, and it's not that it's not right, it is right, but the serum levels are the concentration of the particular vitamin in your serum. Whereas what SpectraCell is looking at is the is whether you have been able to absorb that particular nutrient into your cells. Your cells is where everything important goes on.
All the energy.
Right. The serum is what your cells float around in. It's static and it changes from one day to the next. So what we're trying to figure out is whether you have deficiencies on a cellular level, and that is so much more important.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we get into then, what are the things that we test for? What are the things that sometimes lead us to have imbalances? So let's first generally talk about the test, like what are minerals? What are some of the minerals that the SpectraCell tests for?
So SpectraCell looks at all the essential minerals. We look at all, your calcium and your magnesium levels. This is all essential to the body's
Potassium,
function.
right? All that.
We don't look at potassium, but we look at other stuff.
Yeah.
So
Manganese.
Manganese, of course,
Yeah.
right. So, the thing is that what happens to a lot of people is they don't feel well. They go to the doctor. Their doctor does standard laboratory testing, and they look at the labs and they say, you're fine. And yet the patient feels bad. And the other lab tests aren't picking up on what's wrong.
Yeah.
And so it's sad in a way that standard medicine has moved away from looking at nutrition. Nutrition is so very, very basic.
Well, I think what has happened is that back, and my mentor was Jeffrey Bland. He was one of the leading biochemists, and he's written the books Genetic Nutritioneering and many other books. But what he explained to me when I asked him that question many, many years ago is that back in the 20s and 30s, nutrition kind of separated from the farming industry, and nutrition kind of separated from the scientific community. And so then everybody just thought nutrition classes were like where you farming or cooking classes, right?
Right,
and
food pyramids.
Right, food pyramids and all of that.
Right.
And then science was with the development of drugs and things. So it was a big separation. And now we're realizing, and pharmaceutical companies are now branding Lovaza, which is, by the way, an omega-3 fish oil. They're Deplin, which is a breakdown product of folic acid,
Absolutely, right.
So, which is 5-methyl-tetrahydrofolic acid. So now it's converging.
It's converging.
But unfortunately, now they're seeing a market in nutrients. So now the nutrients are under attack, so to speak, because what claims they can make, because they want the pharmaceutical companies to actually maybe try to change a little bit and then get it into a what we so-called drug.
Right.
So really there is a now convergence that's happening because people realize. I was in nutrigenomics 20 years ago, and now the field has exploded.
Right. In fact, what's interesting is I've been with SpectraCell coming up on 8 years now, and when I first started with SpectraCell 7.5 years ago, most of the doctors on my list were naturopathic doctors, acupuncturists, doctors of osteopathic medicine, DOs. But now my list is full of MDs.
Yes.
More and more medical doctors are now realizing that we do need to go back to the basics. We do need to start looking at nutrition again. So many chronic issues: depression, fatigue, fibromyalgia.
Do you know that depression, for example, just letting the audience know, is sometimes the inability to really absorb the vitamin B12, or to have the methylation, which is a breakdown product of folic acid. So once you fix those, sometimes a patient's the depression is gone.
Right.
Not in every instance, but in a lot of the instances, we know that there's a lot of nutritional imbalances. Right. So getting back to the minerals, we've talked about the minerals. What about the vitamins?
Yes.
We test for vitamin C,
all the B vitamins,
vitamin K, the B vitamins,
K2,
as we know
D.
that, and people don't understand that vitamin B5, B6 are very involved in adrenals, in helping us deal with stress, and sometimes those can get depleted, and that can cause a whole host of imbalances. And so I think that vitamins, antioxidants,
absolutely,
coenzyme Q10. Which is an ubiquitous antioxidant. There's vitamin C as well as an antioxidant, and so vitamin E. So you have a whole host, many other antioxidants that are tested for. And then also, I know you guys test for the what is the amino acids. Now, amino acids are amazing because I use what we call targeted amino acid therapy, where I sort of try to figure out where the imbalance might be, because neurotransmitters, which are located in our brain, are really composed of amino acids.
Right.
Okay, and it's really the neurotransmitter imbalances are actually, in effect, amino acid imbalances.
Right.
And sometimes we kind of try to figure out what can cross the blood-brain barrier, and then in order to try to get some nutrients or amino acids that are capable of crossing the blood-brain barrier, we're able to sometimes correct those neurotransmitter imbalances. Right. So it's very, very important to sometimes look at amino acids. Sometimes people will come to me and they'll say, I can't build muscle mass. Well, that's because the branched chain amino acids are low.
Right.
You're just not simply getting it. And branched chain amino acids, your body can't make. Right. And so this is another thing. Right. A lot of people think that their body has the ability to make everything, and it doesn't.
And it's unfortunate too, because our food today is just not as nutritious as it used to be.
So why is that? Why don't you ever wonder why they've not retested the RDA values? Should be brought up to date, right? We update computers, we update protocols, we update everything, and all of medicine is updated. Right. And yet the RDA values of the foods has not been retested.
Right. Our medical director,
for over 50 years. Yeah.
Right. Our medical director calls it recommended death allowance instead of RDA, because it's just not enough. It's just not enough. And on average, we see at least 3 deficiencies in every person. Yeah. People just don't realize that. I talk to so many people, even doctors. They'll say to me, well, I eat pretty good. I eat the paleo diet, or I eat this diet, or I eat that diet. And they think they're getting what they need from food. And unfortunately, it's just not enough. You have to eat so much food. And we're not in the supplement business. We're just a lab. So we're, whether someone wants to get their vitamins through their diet, or whether they want to supplement, is of no consequence to us. We're just trying to give people the information. Why do you feel bad? How do you maximize your health? How do you be in ultimate, health? Unfortunately, we're all trying to stay young looking on the outside, but we've got to keep our bodies young on the inside. And how do we do that is keeping everything functioning properly. And the vitamins and the nutrients and the amino acids and the antioxidants help our bodies run efficiently on the inside, so that we stay youthful and vibrant and excited to live every day. That's the most important thing.
Yeah. And what is a Spectrox score that you do? There's an Immunodex score and a Spectrox score, which is, I think, is really interesting to tell the audience what that is.
The Spectrox is what we're measuring with the Spectrox is we're measuring the body's ability to withstand oxidative stress. Exactly. Our bodies are constantly being bombarded with free radicals in every day, okay, and pollutants and everything that's assaulting our body as we just go through daily life. No matter how healthfully we try to live, there's stuff that we just can't avoid. And so we need our body's defenses to fight that off. And unfortunately, sometimes if we have low antioxidant levels, or we have a lot of stress in our life, our body isn't, it's not strong. It's not strong enough to fight off all those free radicals. So we can tell you how well your body's doing in that regard.
That's the Spectral score. Yeah.
Right.
Is that, I know we're running out of time. We're going to take a commercial break and be right back. But the website is SpectraCell, www.spectracell.com. Is that right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, we're going to be right back with a very interesting topic with Beth Cooper, representing SpectraCell. I'm NainaMD, Fusion of Science and Beauty, right here in Beverly Hills. Hello everyone, welcome back to my show. This is NainaMD, Fusion of Science and Beauty, right here in Beverly Hills. And I have my guest, Beth Cooper, who represents SpectraCell, which is a leading, innovative, alternative company that does amazing testing. Beth, we were talking about all the mineral deficiencies, antioxidant deficiencies. We were talking about the vitamin deficiencies. But, if there was one, for example, one deficiency that comes up a lot, what would you say that is?
Zinc.
Zinc.
Zinc is probably between the first and the third most common deficiency that we see.
What are the top 3 deficiencies that you guys are seeing on the reporting?
B12, vitamin D, zinc. I mean, those come up all the time. Folate. It varies, but those are probably the top 4
that come up a lot.
Yeah. Oh,
and
constantly.
those are huge. I mean, zinc deficiency is linked with depression. It's a cofactor with hormonal production, especially testosterone. Vitamin B12 is again with depression, with a cognitive functioning. It's all with the central nervous system. We have, for example, the third deficiency that you mentioned was with folate. A lot of people cannot break down folic acid, so that's a huge thing. And there's just so much as a physician. That's why I rely on a lab that does this, because there's so much information I get when I get this report. Now, there's another really important thing on the micronutrient deficiency testing, which is the immunodex. And the immunodex, just explain to the audience what that represents.
The immunodex tells us how well your immune system is working. That's the long and the short of it. We're looking at how well your cells respond to a particular mitogen that we're working with, and everybody's cells divide at a particular rate. And so when a person's immune system isn't working properly, we see this function either slowing down or speeding up. I mean, this is where we're trying to make sure that your cells are proliferating, dividing at the rate at which they should be for your age. And that's a very important indicator of overall immune system function.
Absolutely. And we know that there's so many diseases, cancer and so forth, are really immune deficient states. So I think it's very important. And this is a great, when I do this test, it's a great way for me to just look at everything and then kind of see, where the patient might be, imbalanced. How often, I think it's important to realize is, how often do you repeat that test? Let's say you do that test and I correct your deficiencies. Isn't it that the red blood cells only live 120 days or something like that? Or so you should test every 4 months then to see if you corrected those imbalances?
Yeah, every 4 to 6 months your cells turn over. So we want to see a new batch of cells. So if you have a number of deficiencies, and on average we see 3 to 5 deficiencies in every patient.
Is that about average?
That's about average, surprisingly.
That's a lot of deficiencies.
Yeah. In people who believe that they're healthy in some cases. And generally what we want to do is you want to replete, whether through their diet or whether through supplementation, and then retest in about 4 to 6 months.
So that test gets repeated usually. I usually repeat it about 4 to 6 months. You're right. Okay, so again, that's called the micronutrient deficiency testing. This is a brochure that they usually put out. It's spectracell.com. That's www.spectracell, spectracell.com. And I want to move on to another subject, which is I love theories of aging. And there's many theories of aging. Of course, we have the oxidative stress, where our bodies are under attack with free radicals that causes us to age. Then there's mitochondrial dysfunction, where the body is not able to produce enough oxygen, or the mitochondria, which is a powerhouse of energy, that gets depleted, and that leads to aging. But there's another theory called the telomeres.
Right.
So just explain to us just a little bit about how the SpectraCell even got onto talking about telomeres, because we all look about, if we look good and feel good, then we're obviously must be doing good. But SpectraCell says, no, wait a minute, let's test your telomeres.
Right. Actually, we didn't say it, but Elizabeth Blackburn, who won the Nobel Prize, what she discovered was there's DNA, there's extra DNA that's at the ends of our chromosomes. So, but they don't code for any proteins. There's no coding for proteins. They don't code for any genes. So the theory was that it was just junk DNA. It didn't mean anything. But what Elizabeth Blackburn realized is that those little segments at the ends of the chromosomes seemed to get shorter as her subjects got older. But what she also realized was when people were sick or unhealthy, their telomeres were also shorter. So she discovered the fact that your telomeres are an indication of your cellular age. We tend to decide whether someone's aging well based on how they look on the outside. If they look young, then they're aging well. But unfortunately, that's not the best indicator, because we can fool.
How do Spectra test for it? How did they develop? Did SpectraCell develop the test, or did you license that test?
Well, we are looking. What we're doing is we're measuring the length of the telomeres with standard DNA sequencing. So you know, it's.
And then when are you finding that, for example, what are the majority of the reports showing that you get back?
It varies. It varies. The unfortunate part is sometimes people's telomeres are a lot shorter than they are. So your telomeres might
in proportion to their age, relative to their age,
right? So
biological age,
right? So the telomere might be a particular length that would match up to everybody who's 50, and if your patient is 50, then they're doing well. But if they're 40, that's a problem. The patient's in trouble, and you know there's not a simple, easy solution. It's not like you do this and
to lengthen your telomeres.
Right.
Have you seen any of the report? When should you retest? If you, let's say, if a doctor such as myself puts someone on a regimen, which I have my own things that I do to try to help the patient lengthen the telomeres, then when should you retest?
You should probably retest within about a year to 2 years.
Because it takes a while, doesn't it?
It takes a while.
This test takes longer, and that's really the point I wanted to make. When you're actually trying to affect a micronutrient deficiency, can be corrected much more readily and be seen much more readily than something like this when you're actually aging and you have to actually reverse or partially reverse an aging process. Then it takes a lot longer.
Right. Yeah. The telomere. The problem is telomere shortening is a process of losing base pairs. So the rate at which we're losing them is an indicator of how well we're aging. So what we want to do is slow that process down. We call it attrition. So as the telomeres get shorter, we want to slow the process down instead of having them shorten too fast. And the way we do that is correcting micronutrient deficiencies, balancing hormones, getting your patient to the right weight that they should be for their height and age, making sure they're getting enough sleep, getting their stress levels down, lowering their exposure to oxidative stress. I mean, it's a multifaceted approach, and most patients should be doing these things, but they may not be, or they may be doing some of the things, but not enough of the things. So that's where you can really affect that.
Yeah. And I think also in terms of the telomeres, this was a huge, huge stories, on the telomeres. And for example, there's a lot of nutraceuticals that say that they can help reverse that or lengthen the telomeres, which is true. But exactly what you pointed out, it's really a multi-pronged approach. You really have to balance a lot of other things in order to really get those telomeres to slow that, what you say, the attrition rate, so that you end up being proportionate to your age, so to speak. So yeah, it's a fascinating thing. There's one other thing which I think we need to mention very briefly. I know there are time constraints in today's discussion. I could go forever, by the way. I love labs, and I'm a biochemist nerd. But I love just the way that lab companies, the way that they approach the biochemistry and then test that. I think it's phenomenal. But one thing is what we call the lipoprotein panel. It's been your basic panel, and people have never really understood the concept that cholesterol. It's it's very archaic to go and say, well, my doctor just said my cholesterol's great. Well, excuse me. Okay, with now what we know now, you're just going to tell me that you just have a good number and then that's good enough?
Right.
So in other words, what I'm trying to say is that the total cholesterol is subdivided into HDL, which is supposed to be the good cholesterol, and then the bad cholesterol, which is the LDL. That was the old, and then triglycerides, and then there was a ratio. And so if the LDL, which is a bad one, was high, so the recommendations now are to keep it below 100, okay? And let's say if it was high, then that would be a bad thing. Sometimes, depending on how high it was, people would get put on medication. And the concern is that, wait a minute, how come people in Italy who had LDLs that were much higher were not getting heart attacks or not having any, or strokes? Whereas, so what was that interplay about? And that is because you don't, what we quantify. So in other words, your LDL may be 90, which is where you should be below 100, and my LDL may be 150. But if you have the time bombs, your particle types has to be differentiated.
Right.
And the particle number,
right.
that is the thing. Right. And so you could be a 90, but you could be the time bomb and not me.
Right.
So you have to, what we call, identify which particle type you are, what is your particle number,
right.
and then you assess the risk of the heart disease based on that. So now what you guys should be asking, I want the audience to learn, is to say, go to the doctor and say, don't. It's not just like, oh, my LDL, my number is great. No. What kind of LDL particles do I have?
And
what is my number? And how many do I have?
Because
Because that is really the crux of the risk of heart disease. And it really concerns me because now the guidelines are showing for statin drugs, for example, and believe me, there are leaders even in the conventional cardiologists, top-notch cardiologists, especially in Britain. There was a huge article that came out that are very against the new guidelines, which are just saying, hey, anybody who's just below, a next thing should just go on a statin drug. And they're just not even looking at what kind of particle. You're just playing a numbers game. That is scary.
Right, and there's a particular type of LDL particle called Lp(a) that does not respond to statins.
Exactly.
So
and it's genetic. It's genetic. So so if you had that, you know that you don't even need to go on a statin drug because you're never going to be able to get that. There's other things you can do partially because that's a hard one for me to decrease in my patient population. But I am able to still make a headway. I use things like niacin sometimes, or other things that we do. But it really helps you to manage the patient, knowing what particle subtype they have. So that's called a lipoprotein particle profiling. You need to profile those particles. And people have really not understood that concept. So I guess the purpose of this show is to really alert the audience that, gee, we're in a tech revolution. We've got iPhones changing, to the i7. I mean, in months, we've got a new iPhone. And yet we are in the midst of a health revolution, and we have the technology. We have the know-how. We've got companies like SpectraCell that are fabulous, but yet we don't have that knowledge. The knowledge is not widespread. So I think as anti-aging regenerative medicine, the specialty, and as alternative medicine, we have a very powerful knowledge in our hands, but we need to educate most of the people on it, So thank you.
I think people need to be their own advocate. If your doctor is still using more archaic methods, either find another doctor or ask for what you want. Ask for what you need.
Demand it. Well, actually, your company and everything else is coming from demand. I have literally people will come and say, I want to know what my micronutrient deficiencies are.
Right.
I literally have people coming for that. Well, listen, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure to actually have SpectraCell, to have, for me, to even talk about SpectraCell. I pride myself in actually being able to pick out, companies or health, trends that are extremely, extremely valuable, I think, to the consumers. And I think this company is very, very valuable. So it's again www.spectracell.com. That's SPECTRACELL.com. Look them up. They're a fabulous company. And thanks, Beth, for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
This is NainaMD. We're going to see you next week right here in Beverly Hills. Fusion of Science and Beauty.